Hello everyone, wishing you a wonderful day. Imagine the person you love deeply finally stands before you, offering you an engagement ring with all sincerity. But instead of receiving the words "I do," you hear the words "No." Why is that? After returning to Jack and thinking that all the problems have been resolved, Tien still firmly refuses. Not only that, in Jack's heart, a terrifying doubt arises. Is the child in Tien's belly really his? Is it a secret that she cannot tell? Or is the ghost of the past weighing down on her heart? What is hidden behind those sad eyes? And does Jack dare to go all the way to find the truth? Watch until the end, because the answer may leave you speechless. And don't forget to subscribe so we can continue to bring you dramatic love stories. The pain was smoldering, the silent storms still stirring the heart. The first light of the morning poured in through the window, falling on the floor in thin golden streaks, sparkling with flying dust. Tien bent over the wooden table, the soft cloth in her hand moving slowly. Each stroke was gentle but patient, as if she was trying to erase the scratches not only on the wood, but also in her heart. She was back, and this time, she would not leave. It was not only a vow for Jack but also for the home she wanted to rebuild from the ruins. The smell of old wood mixed with the faint scent of tea from the kitchen, creating a rare sense of peace. Somewhere, the ticking of a clock rang out regularly, reminding her of the passing of time. But even as her hands were absorbed in her work, Tien's eyes still had a silent emptiness. That is, the morning wind blew through the door, gently tossing her hair to one side. Her gaze drifted to a distant place, a place hiding a secret that Jack longed to know. Jack drove silently, his eyes never leaving the road ahead. The streetlights drifted back through the windshield like cold streaks of light. Tien sat beside him, her hands clasped together, resting on her stomach. Each vibration of the car made her hug him tighter, as if she was holding on to a secret that even she herself could not face. No one said anything. The distance between the two of them, even though it was only a few hands, was still longer than the road leading to the hospital. In Jack's mind, the time calculations repeated themselves like a haunting math problem. He wanted today's examination to be the final answer. The hospital was crowded in the morning. The slightly spicy smell of antiseptic wafted into his nose. The sound of slippers dragging, the sound of machines, the calling of patients' names, all blended into a dense sound that made people both anxious and tense. When Tien's name rang out from the loudspeaker, Jack stood up and walked beside her into the examination room. The doctor, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, smiled at them, then gestured for Tien to lie down on the ultrasound bed. The machine hummed, the black and white screen began to flash. A small image appeared, a figure only a few centimeters, but already had vague movements as if beckoning. Jack stared, an indescribable feeling rising. His heart sank, partly because of emotion, partly because he suddenly realized, this baby, no matter what the result was still alive, breathing in her belly. But then, the doctor's smile suddenly stopped. He leaned closer to the screen, his hand adjusting the probe, his eyes intently reading the parameters. The air in the room suddenly became thick. There are some signs. His voice lowered. We need to monitor more. It could be related to the development of the fetus. I will order some more tests and monitor more closely. The room suddenly seemed smaller. Tien stiffened, her eyes wide open. Jack was also silent, but in that moment, all the doubts, all the questions about DNA disappeared like morning dew. In the sun, there was only one thing occupying his mind. What if something happened to this baby? The two of them sat in the waiting area for the test. When the doctor gave the temporary result as needs further monitoring, but is not at an immediate dangerous level, Jack just nodded in thanks and helped Tien to the car. On the way home, his hand tightened on the steering wheel. Occasionally, he glanced at Tien. Her face was turned towards the window, her eyes distant. Unconsciously, Jack reached out and took her hand. I will be here to take care of you and the baby. Everything else, later. Tien nodded, slightly, her eyes moist. She said nothing, but that silence was warmer than any explanation. Inside the car, the air was thick. Jack drove silently, but his eyes occasionally turned to look at Tien. She sat still, her hands clasped together on her thighs, her gaze directed out the window, where the sunlight slid across the sidewalk. Jack took a deep breath, as if preparing to enter a battle. Tien's voice was low and even, each word falling slower than the heartbeat in his chest. I never thought I would have this opportunity a second time. From his pocket, he pulled out a small box. The hinge opened, making a creak sound so light it sounded like a breath. Inside were a ring and a gold necklace. Sunlight shone through the car window, touching the metal, flashing a brief but brilliant light between the two of them. Tien's eyes widened, not in surprise, but with an indescribable stillness, like the surface of a lake suddenly becoming quiet after a gust of wind. "I've liked you for a long time," Jack said, his voice firm and measured. "You're strong, you're kind. I can't imagine life without you." He paused, took another breath. "I want to marry you, Zixien." Silence that followed stretched, almost as if the car had stopped moving. She looked at the ring, then at him. Her lips parted, but the words were stuck somewhere in her throat. Finally, barely louder than the hum of the air conditioner, she whispered, "I can't." Jack frowned slightly, and before she could ask, she continued, her voice trembling, but clear. "I still don't remember anything. I don't know my past. I don't know who I am, and I'm afraid that if I say yes now, it will be a promise I can't keep." She gently placed the ring box back in his hand. The touch was light, but firm, like a knife cutting through hope. "I'm sorry." Her eyes lowered, no longer daring to look at him. Jack sat still, his hand still holding the box, as if it weighed 100 times more, carrying all the pressure and burden that this encounter had left behind. He didn't say anything more, just opened the door and stepped down, letting the construction wind rush in, carrying the sound of hammers, the sound of steel cutters, and the burning smell of electric welding. Tien also opened the door, quietly following behind. The ground beneath her feet shook slightly with each beat of the excavator. She had just stepped onto the construction steps when she suddenly stopped. A sharp sound rang out, the sound of metal screeching against each other, making her head feel like someone had stabbed her with a sharp point. The pain came violently, forcing her to hold her temple. The image before her eyes blurred, then suddenly appeared. A construction site similar to this, but the sky was grayer. The cold wind blew into her skin. A hurried scream, the sound of running feet. A figure wearing a reflective vest fell onto the scaffolding, right before an iron bar fell with it. Blood stained the cement floor. And at the edge of her memory, Tien saw a face, Jack rushing towards her, eyes wide with panic. Blinked repeatedly, her memories shattered like pieces of glass falling to the floor. Jack had turned around, his hand on her shoulder, his eyes filled with worry. "What's wrong?" Tien wanted to answer, "I'm fine," but her throat was dry. Her eyes looked at him, strangely as if she was facing someone both familiar and distant, and she herself didn't understand why. Tien stood in the middle of the construction site, her hair in disarray. Her hand was still on her forehead, her breathing rapid. Then each image like a film reel appeared in reverse. Jack's smile on a rainy morning, the warm hug when she was tired, the sound of his heart beating in her ears as they lay together. And then, the terrifying collision, the clanging of metal, the figure rushing to push her away, all blended into a fierce wave that swept away her mind. Tears suddenly welled up. She turned around, saw Jack walking quickly towards her. Without saying a word, Tien rushed to hug him tightly, as if wanting to make up for the lost days. Jack was stunned, feeling each hot tear soak into his shirt. "I remember. Her voice choked everything. "And I used to love you so much." Jack hugged her tighter, but in his eyes, mixed with joy, was an unnamed worry. Tien gently placed her hand on her stomach, her eyes still filled with tears but shining with determination. "I remember everything, and now, we have a child," Jack choked up, hugging her tightly. In the middle of the noisy construction site, at that moment, only the heartbeats of 3 people combined into one remained.